How the rich and poor lived during the bubonic plague. Daily rules and survival. Compilation. The door slams shut. Outside, in the narrow stone street, a cart rolls past at dawn. The driver does not speak. He does not need to. Everyone knows what the cart carries. Bodies wrapped in stained linen stacked like firewood, faces covered, names forgotten. The wheels creak over cobblestones still damp with morning fog. Inside the house, a merchant holds his breath. He presses a cloth soaked in vinegar against his mouth. His wife kneels by the fireplace, burning sage and rosemary, filling the room with smoke. Their children huddle in the corner, silent. No one cries anymore. Crying wastes energy they need to survive. Across the city, beyond the walls, in a village where the fields stretch wide and empty, a peasant woman wakes to find her husband cold beside her. His skin is mottled, dark bruises spreading like ink across his chest and neck. She does not scream. Screaming brings the priest. The priest brings the officials bring the boards and nails. They will seal her inside. She has seen it happen. So she drags the body into the yard herself, covers it with straw, and pretends he is still alive when the landlord's men come to collect the rent. This is not war. This is not famine. This is something else. Something that does not discriminate by sword or season, but seems to choose its victims by invisible rules no one understands. The rich flee to their country estates. The poor remain in the cities, packed tight in tenements where the air itself feels poisonous. And between them, a question grows louder with every passing week. Does wealth protect you from death, or does it only buy you time? And if time is all you have, what do you do with it when the world outside your window is ending? This is Europe in the year 1348. The plague has arrived. They call it the Great Mortality, the Pestilence, the Blue Sickness. Later, historians will name it the Black Death. It comes from the east, traveling trade routes, carried in the holds of ships, hidden in bales of cloth and sacks of grain, living in the fur of rats, the bodies of fleas, the breath of sailors who do not yet know they are dying. It reaches Sicily in October of 1347. By spring, it has spread to France, England, the German states, the Low Countries. By summer, it is everywhere. Before the plague, Europe is prosperous. Not for everyone, of course. Prosperity never is. But the continent is stable, populations are growing, cities expand beyond their medieval walls, trade flourishes. Markets overflow with goods from distant lands. Spices from the Indies, silk from China, wine from Burgundy, wool from England. The church is powerful, its cathedrals rising like stone prayers toward heaven. Kings rule vast territories, knights enforce order, peasants work the land, everyone knows their place. The social order is fixed, ordained by God, unquestionable. For the wealthy, life is comfortable. Nobles live in manor houses with stone walls and glazed windows. Merchants own multi-story homes in city centers, with workshops on the ground floor and private chambers above. They eat meat regularly, drink imported wine, wear clothing made from fine linen and wool dyed in rich colors. Their children are educated by tutors. Their illnesses are treated by physicians trained in universities. They have access to clean water from private wells. They have servants to cook, clean, and manage their households. They have space. Space to breathe, space to move, space to isolate when danger comes. For the poor, life is precarious. Peasants live in one-room cottages with earthen floors and thatched roofs that leak when it rains. Urban workers crowd into tenements where entire families share a single room. They eat bread, porridge, vegetables, occasionally salted fish. Meat is a luxury reserved for feast days. Their water comes from public wells and rivers contaminated with waste. Their clothes are rough wool and linen, mended repeatedly, passed down through generations. They work from sunrise to sunset 6 days a week for wages barely sufficient to survive. They have no savings, no reserves, no cushion against disaster. When the plague arrives, these differences will matter more than anyone imagines. The plague spreads through proximity. This is the fundamental rule, though no one in the 14th century understands it. Medical theory of the era is based on the work of ancient Greek physicians, particularly Galen, who taught that disease results from imbalances in the four bodily humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. Physicians believe the plague is caused by corrupted air, or miasma, produced by earthquakes, planetary alignments, or divine punishment for human sin. They do not understand contagion. They do not know about bacteria. They cannot see Yersinia pestis, the bacterium that causes bubonic plague, transmitted through flea bites, or its pneumonic form, spread through respiratory droplets when an infected person coughs. This ignorance shapes every response. Cities try to purify the air by burning aromatic woods and herbs in public squares. Physicians wear long robes and bird-like masks filled with flowers and spices, believing the pleasant scents will protect them from miasma. They bleed patients to balance their humors, weakening already fragile bodies. They prescribe mercury, arsenic, and other toxic substances. They recommend avoiding bathing, believing water opens pores and allows corrupted air to enter the body. These treatments do not help. Often, they make things worse. Housing density determines survival rates. The wealthy live in spacious homes with multiple rooms, private gardens, and distance between neighbors. When plague appears in their area, they can leave. They have country estates, relatives in distant provinces, resources to travel and relocate. The poor have none of these options. They live in overcrowded neighborhoods where buildings lean against each other, where alleys are so narrow 2 people cannot pass without touching, where families of 8 or 10 share rooms measuring 12 feet by 12 feet. Fleas jump easily from person to person. Rats nest in the walls. Waste accumulates in streets. The plague moves through these neighborhoods like fire through dry timber. Social structure creates vulnerability. Peasants owe labor obligations to their lords. Even during plague, they must work the fields, harvest crops, deliver rents in grain and livestock. They cannot flee without permission, and permission is rarely granted. Urban workers depend on daily wages. Missing work means missing meals. They continue going to markets, workshops, and construction sites, even as bodies pile up around them. Servants live in their masters' homes, sleeping in kitchens and hallways, exposed to every illness that enters the household. The economic system of feudalism and early capitalism traps the poor in place, while the rich have mobility, choice, and the luxury of fear without consequence. The first sign is fever, then chills, weakness, headache. Within days, swellings appear, buboes, egg-sized lumps in the groin, armpits, and neck, filled with infected lymph and blood. The skin around them turns black. In severe cases, patches of gangrene spread across the body as blood vessels rupture and tissue dies. The pneumonic form attacks the lungs, causing victims to cough up blood and struggle for breath. Death comes quickly, often within 3 to 5 days of symptom onset. Survival rates are low, perhaps 30% live, though many are left with permanent damage. In Florence, a wealthy silk merchant named Francesco survives by isolating his household completely. At the first news of plague in the city, he moves his family to a villa in the Tuscan countryside, 20 miles from the nearest town. He brings his entire household, wife, children, 2 servants, a cook. He stocks the villa with 6 months of preserved food, wine, olive oil, candles, firewood. He posts guards at the gate with instructions to turn away all visitors. No one enters, no one leaves. Letters arrive, tied to stones and thrown over the wall. News filters in slowly. The plague is devastating Florence. Half the population is dead or dying. Bodies lie unburied in the streets. Churches are overwhelmed. The government has collapsed. Francesco's isolation works, his family survives. But survival comes at a price. Complete disconnection from the world, from friends, from community, from responsibility to anyone beyond the villa walls. In London, a family of dock workers lives in a single room above a tavern near the Thames. The father loads cargo on ships. The mother washes clothes for wealthy households. 3 children sleep on straw mattresses on the floor. When plague reaches their neighborhood, they have no option to flee. The father continues working because the family needs his wages. Within a week, he develops fever. 2 days later, buboes appear. He dies on the 4th day. Officials nail boards across the door, sealing the family inside with his body. This is the law. Infected households must be quarantined for 40 days. The mother screams, beats on the door, begs to be released. No one answers. Neighbors push food through a gap under the door. On the 10th day, the mother falls ill. The children care for her as best they can, but she dies on the 13th day. The children survive, emerging 6 weeks later into a transformed city where 1/3 of the population is gone. Strategies diverge completely by class. The rich rely on flight, isolation, and purchasing power. They buy the services of physicians, access to experimental treatments, space and time to recover. They stockpile food, medicine, and supplies. They can afford to stop working. The poor rely on luck, endurance, and mutual aid. Neighbors care for each other's children when parents die. Strangers bury bodies when families cannot. Priests hear confessions in the streets when churches close. Survival becomes communal because it must be. There is no alternative. Fear transforms society. Social bonds dissolve. Parents abandon sick children. Children flee from dying parents. Spouses leave each other. The Italian writer Giovanni Boccaccio, observing the plague in Florence, records that brother abandoned brother, uncle abandoned nephew, sister left brother, and often wives left their husbands. Even worse, almost unbelievable, fathers and mothers abandoned their own children, leaving them unvisited as if they belonged to strangers. This collapse of family obligation, the most fundamental social structure, reveals the depth of terror the plague produces. Scapegoating intensifies. Unable to understand the disease, people search for someone to blame. Jewish communities become targets. Across Europe, particularly in the German states, France, and Spain, mobs attack Jewish neighborhoods, accusing them of poisoning wells and spreading plague deliberately. Thousands are killed. Entire communities are destroyed. In Strasbourg, in February of 1349, approximately 900 Jews are burned alive in the city cemetery. The pogroms continue for months. Authorities sometimes intervene, sometimes participate, sometimes stand aside. The Pope issues a papal bull declaring Jews are not responsible for the plague, noting they are dying at the same rates as Christians. The violence continues anyway. Fear needs a target. Reason cannot stop it. Religious responses vary. Some interpret the plague as divine punishment for sin and organize processions of flagellants. Groups of men who march from town to town, whipping themselves with leather straps embedded with iron points until blood runs down their backs, believing their suffering will appease God's wrath. The Church eventually condemns these movements as heretical and dangerous. Others see the plague as evidence that the world is ending, that the apocalypse described in the book of Revelation has begun. They give away possessions, abandon work, spend their remaining days in prayer. Still others lose faith entirely. If God allows such suffering, if prayer does not protect the faithful, if priests and bishops die alongside sinners, what does that mean? The theological crisis is profound. Economic systems break down. Labor shortages change everything. Before the plague, labor is abundant and cheap. Land is valuable. After the plague, with 1/3 to 1/2 of the population dead, labor becomes scarce and expensive. Peasants demand higher wages. They refuse traditional obligations. They move to areas where landlords offer better conditions. The feudal system, built on fixed relationships and inherited status, begins to crack. Authorities try to prevent these changes. England passes the Statute of Laborers in 1351, fixing wages at pre-plague levels and prohibiting workers from leaving their home parishes. The law fails. Market forces are stronger than legislation. The poor, for the first time in generations, have leverage. They begin to use it. The plague ends eventually. Outbreaks continue for decades, recurring in waves through the 15th and 16th centuries. But the Great Pandemic of 1348 to 1353 finally subsides. Europe is transformed. The population has dropped from approximately 75 million to perhaps 50 million. Entire villages are abandoned. Fields return to wilderness. The economic and social landscape is fundamentally altered. For survivors, particularly the poor, conditions improve in unexpected ways. Labor scarcity drives wages upward. A farm worker in England who earned 2 pence per day before the plague can now demand 4 or 5 pence. Food becomes cheaper because demand has fallen with population. Meat, once a luxury, appears more regularly on common tables. Peasants acquire land abandoned by plague victims. Social mobility increases. The rigid hierarchy of feudalism loosens. These changes do not happen smoothly or peacefully. The English peasants' revolt of 1381, Wat Tyler's rebellion, is a direct consequence of the tensions between the new economic reality and the old legal structure. Authorities try to force society back into its pre-plague form. The people refuse. Medical understanding does not advance significantly for centuries. Plague returns periodically until the 18th century, without doctors understanding its true cause. The miasma theory persists. Real progress in preventing plague comes not from medicine, but from public health infrastructure. Better sanitation, pest control, quarantine systems based on observation rather than theory. The connection between rats, fleas, and disease is not confirmed until 1894, when Alexandra Yersin identifies the bacterium. By then, plague has largely disappeared from Europe due to changes in housing construction, sanitation, and the displacement of black rats by brown rats that live further from human habitation. The cultural legacy is profound. The plague appears in literature, art, and collective memory for generations. It shapes religious doubt and reform, contributes to the eventual Protestant Reformation, influences the development of vernacular literature as Latin becomes associated with a failed clerical class. It demonstrates with brutal clarity that wealth cannot fully insulate anyone from systemic crises, though it certainly improves one's odds. The merchant in his villa survives, but his world is gone. The children in the sealed room survive, but they inherit a society desperate for their labor. We look back at the 14th century and see primitive responses to disease: bloodletting, miasma theory, scapegoating, flight. We tell ourselves we are different now. We have science, public health systems, antibiotics, vaccines. We do. But the social dynamics of pandemic remain recognizable. Wealth still buys distance, space, time, and options. Poverty still means crowding, exposure, and limited choices. Fear still seeks targets. Authorities still struggle between public health and economic continuity. The plague did not end because humanity became wiser or more compassionate. It ended because circumstances changed. Populations stabilized, infrastructure improved. The bacterium found fewer opportunities to spread. The question Francesco asked himself in his villa remains relevant. Does wealth protect you from death, or does it only buy you time? The answer, across 700 years, is both. It buys time. And time, when a crisis eventually passes, means you are still alive to rebuild. The poor in the sealed room also survived, but they lost everything first. That difference matters. It mattered then. It matters now. This is not ancient history. This is a pattern, and patterns repeat.